May 14th, 2009. Just off a barren stretch of highway in central Washington lay the twisted remains of a white Ford Explorer, 200 feet below the edge of a cliff.
The SUV was compacted into like this small vehicle that didn't even resemble the original SUV that went off the cliff. There was mangled metal everywhere. It was not a pretty picture.
Police pulled the driver out of the car. His ID says his name is James Lull, and he's got a round-trip ticket to Hawaii. Investigators are puzzled. How does a man with a ticket to paradise end up at the bottom of a desert ravine? The year is 1990, and 41-year-old James Lull has just arrived on the Hawaiian island of Kauai to begin a new chapter in his life. Lull lands a few jobs in the mortgage industry and eventually ends up as the branch manager at U.S. Financial.
People liked doing business with him because he was this affable guy. He was this big teddy bear of a fellow, and people liked to be around him.
And while he collects friends easily, he also has a penchant for collecting objects. Opals, arrowheads, meteorites, and sports memorabilia. His enthusiasm is contagious.
He always had something in his pocket that was interesting to look at. And, some of the time he would, pull it out of his pocket and give it to you.
Claire Mortimer first meets James Lull in December 2000, and he pitches her an investment opportunity. He says many of his loan applicants have poor credit scores, too low to qualify for mortgages. Investors like Mortimer can lend his clients short-term bridge loans. The applicants can then pay off debts.
If he saw somebody whose credit score wasn't quite high enough and it was something as easy as paying off your credit card, those were the people who he would present to me. He would say, this is the situation. Would you be interested in loaning X amount of dollars to this person? And it would be paid back to you within 6 months.
Once the mortgage goes through, investors get their money back, plus a tidy 12% return on their investment in just a few months. Not bad at a time when Treasury bills pay only 6% a year. Lull's bridge loan, if not reported on a mortgage application, is considered mortgage fraud. But Lull never explains that to his investors. And having worked long hours as a nurse while raising 2 teenagers on her own, Mortimer is pulled in by the lure of easy money.
I knew that there was just so many years that my kids would still be with me, and I wanted those years to be in a safe place where I could spend more time with them.
She invests several $1,000s with Lull, and in a few months gets all her money back plus 12%.
This is sweet. I just felt like, okay, this is on the up and up, and let's do it again.
Mortimer begins investing regularly with Lull, as do scores of other investors on Kauai.
We have something in Hawaii that we call the coconut wireless, and that's really the rumor mill that spreads among the people here because everybody knows each other. And so one person talks to someone else at the cookout or at the potluck, and the word spreads like wildfire.
And with a commission on every deal, Lull is reaping the benefits. In 2004, he moves into a $4 million house on the beach and takes his collecting to the next level. He buys more rare coins, including one $287,000 buffalo nickel, and acquires hundreds of pool cues. But you won't find these at your local bar.
Opal-encrusted, handmade pool cues, the most valuable one of which, I understand, was worth about $50,000.
In 2003, Lull has so many applicants looking to boost their scores, he tells Mortimer just to leave her money with him.
He said, keeping track of this and facilitating this back and forth and rolling it over is getting a little complicated, and I'm in this office every day, and every day people come in here who could benefit from these loans. Over the next 2 years, Mortimer takes out 3 mortgages on her own homes.
she invests more than $700,000 with Lull. And why not? He's guaranteeing her 12% a year.
For a short period of time, I was filthy rich.
But the good times don't last. Coming up, James Lull goes from island hero to public enemy number one, and angry investors want blood.
It was like pitchforks and torches. They wanted to string this guy up.
In 2006, James Lull is living an American dream in paradise. He's made millions operating a lucrative side business out of his mortgage company on the Hawaiian island of Kauai. Applicants come to him when they don't have a high enough credit score to qualify for an affordable mortgage. Michael Lilly, a former Attorney General of Hawaii, says Lull gets money from investors, then offers applicants a short-term bridge loan.
Lull gets them a $100,000, $200,000 bridge loan that's used to pay off whatever debt they had.
The loan applicant boosts his credit score and gets the mortgage. And the investor gets a whopping 12% return. The deals are wildly popular. Over the course of 6 years, Lull brings in some 50 investors. But around 2003, the investment scheme becomes a victim of its own success.
People would tell their aunties, their cousins, their moms, their dads to get into this investment opportunity. So James Lull actually, at some point, had more investors than he had actual bridge loans to put their money within.
But Lull keeps taking their money, even with no place to put it. To keep the scheme going, Lull encourages investors to roll their interest payments over into new deals. He then uses the funds to pay off old investors. But there's one problem. Lull must work frantically to bring in new investors, or the scheme will collapse under its own weight.
He was financially under the water at the end of 2005, but nobody knew it.
In May 2006, Lull is getting desperate. He approaches Donnie Maione, a general contractor in Kauai. Lull offers Maione the opportunity to invest $75,000 in a bridge loan for a client.
So he says, he goes, well, I got a client that's looking for a bridge loan.
He offers Maione 2.5% interest for a 2-week note. That's equivalent to a return of 65% a year.
I had heard of people in the community who had gone to him for these deals. And it sounds like one of those too good to be true things. But when you see it happening over and over, I started to question, well, maybe it's a real deal.
He gives Lull the money, but 2 weeks go by and Lull doesn't pay. For months, he holds Maione off with excuses, and Maione isn't alone. Claire Mortimer has been investing with Lull for 5 years, but in June, her monthly payments of $7,400 stopped coming.
I frantically got on the phone, trying to call him, trying to email him, trying to get his attention and find out what the heck was wrong.
By December, Lull is suffocating under a mountain of IOUs. There are now more than 70 creditors demanding upwards of $55 million from Lull. The only way out is for Lull to throw himself at the mercy of the bankruptcy court. Trustee Ronald Kodashirodo is assigned to the case.
I've been doing bankruptcy trustee work for almost 30 years. I've never come across a case like this where I've seen people so devastated by a debtor.
Kodashirodo calls a meeting of the creditors. Gone is the jovial Lull investors have come to trust. Instead, in a packed hearing room, one woman who invested her life savings with Lull demands to know where her money went, and Lull shows no remorse.
Your money was long gone by then. I had paid monthly stipends to people and other small things.
Do you know that you've ruined my life?
Yes.
Cold. Just absolutely cold in his expression.
Attorney Bradley Tam attends the hearing.
I recall sitting there thinking, what, am I looking at Ted Bundy here? This man has absolutely no compassion. And this is the one that everybody liked because he was so friendly.
Seeking refuge from the ire of angry investors, Lull flees to the mainland and settles near relatives in Bellevue, Washington. He promises to help the trustee locate his assets and repay his victims. But the U.S. Trustee's office refers the case to the FBI, and agents begin pounding the pavement to find out what happened.
We go out there and start knocking on doors and talking to the victims to find out exactly what they were told to separate them from their money.
Now the FBI is on his trail, and Lull is forced to trade his $4 million mansion in Paradise for a rented room in a basement outside Seattle, Washington. Peter Schaefer rents another room in the house.
He said that he'd had some bad luck in Hawaii. He'd lost some money and decided he would move away from Hawaii, but he had filed bankruptcy there.
Lull manages to find work at, of all places, a local mortgage company. Then one day he offers his roommate a can't-miss opportunity for, you guessed it, a bridge loan.
He told me that he was doing these loans to mortgage applicants.
Schaefer has some money put aside for his son's college education, and he figures Lull's offer could help strengthen the college fund. Schaefer invests tens of thousands on several short-term loans with Lull for returns of up to 20% per month.
You felt that he was your friend. He was doing you this favor. He was offering you an opportunity to make some money.
But aside from a few reassuring payments to keep Schaefer happy, that money never appears. Instead, whenever Schaefer approaches Lull about getting it back, Lull shows him pocketfuls of opals, rare coins, and jewel-encrusted pool cues.
He would bring them and show you and say, see, I have this, and now I'm going to cash this in, and you will be the recipient of the rest of the money that I owe you.
There's just one problem. The jewels don't belong to him. They're assets he's hiding from the bankruptcy court in Hawaii. After several months of excuses, Schaefer does some research that might have saved him had he done it earlier.
I Googled Jim Lull, Hawaii. Well, up pops this article that Jim Lull is a scam artist.
What's worse is Schaefer finds evidence that others are also being scammed in Washington.
And how much I made phone calls to other people that I knew that I thought might be involved and found out that there were, I believe, 6 different people Jim was definitely into for at least $300,000 to $400,000.
Back in Hawaii, the FBI has finished its investigation. And on September 16, 2008, Lull agrees to accept responsibility and plead guilty to 1 count of wire fraud. He is to be sentenced in April, and the government recommends 12 years in prison. But Schaefer is following the trial and wants the judge to know what's going on in Washington. He flies to Honolulu to attend the sentencing hearing and takes the stand.
I looked at the judge and I said, you know, Your Honor, I don't know the agreement that Mr. Lull has with the court, but I can tell you that he is perpetrating the exact same crime on a smaller scale in Washington. And the judge's mouth just kind of fell open.
The court is shocked. The judge suspects Lull hasn't really accepted responsibility and that he is hiding valuable assets. She delays the hearing 1 month to consider a longer prison term for Lull. On May 15, 2009, the court gathers once again to sentence James Lull. But this time, there's someone missing.
We're sitting there, and the U.S. attorney comes in with the FBI. The public defender comes in, who's supposed to have Mr. Lull with him. And we're waiting, and there's a lot of talking and back and forth. And then the judge comes out. Where's Mr. Lull?
The judge was furious. James Lull didn't show up to his own sentencing, so she issued a bench warrant for his arrest. And because I was the case agent, it was going to be up to me to try and capture James Lull.
But Special Agent Simon doesn't have to wait long. Later that day, he gets a call.
It was a military police officer in Yakima, Washington, who told me that earlier that day, someone had driven off a cliff and fallen 200 feet to their death in an SUV.
When police removed the body, they found court documents, a round-trip plane ticket for Honolulu, and a driver's license that read James Lull. Fingerprints confirm it's him. Tire marks indicate the vehicle was accelerating as it left the highway and traveled almost 100 yards to the 200-foot cliff. The death is ruled a suicide. James Lull, dead at 60 years old. He takes his alleged crimes to the grave, having never been sentenced, and leaves dozens of investors with their life savings completely wiped out. Claire Mortimer betted all on James Lull. She took out 3 mortgages on her homes and lost it, more than $800,000. She sells her home in Kauai at a loss and moves in near relatives on the coast of Maine, 5,000 miles from the gentle breezes of Kauai.
It can happen to anybody. It happened to me. I'm an educated person. I think of myself as being pretty savvy, but I got ripped off big time. Big time.
Donnie Maione lost $75,000 to Lull and is saddled with a high-interest mortgage on the dream home he built for his family. For 2 years, his family isn't sure whether they will be able to stay.
To watch my wife and see the pain that she was in was equally devastating, because here I'm supposed to be the provider, I'm supposed to be the man of the family, thinking that I'm going to be able to, give something to my family here, and I fell short of that.
Peter Schaefer loses his son's college fund to Lull.
It was about $30,000 that could have gone to this education that I certainly would have been happy to have.
Leaving a path of destruction stretching far beyond the small island of Kauai. Lull will be remembered as always wanting one thing.
His goal for the day, and literally day, would be to scam somebody for something. It's what made him tick, was getting something from somebody for nothing.
People liked doing business with him because he was this affable guy. He was this big teddy bear of a fellow, and people liked to be around him.
And while he collects friends easily, he also has a penchant for collecting objects. Opals, arrowheads, meteorites, and sports memorabilia. His enthusiasm is contagious.
He always had something in his pocket that was interesting to look at. And, some of the time he would, pull it out of his pocket and give it to you.
Claire Mortimer first meets James Lull in December
$2 to this person, and it would be paid back to you within 6 months.
Once the mortgage goes through, investors get their money back, plus a tidy 12% return on their investment in just a few months. Not bad at a time when Treasury bills pay only 6% a year. Lull's bridge loan, if not reported on a mortgage application, is considered mortgage fraud. But Lull never explains that to his investors. And having worked long hours as a nurse while raising May 14, 2009, just off a barren stretch of highway in central Washington, lay the twisted remains of a white Ford Explorer, 200 feet below the edge of a cliff.
The SUV was compacted into this small vehicle that didn't even resemble the original SUV that went off the cliff. There was mangled metal everywhere. It was not a pretty picture.
Police pulled the driver out of the car. His ID says his name is James Lull, and he's got a round-trip ticket to Hawaii. Investigators are puzzled. How does a man with a ticket to paradise end up at the bottom of a desert ravine? The year is 1990, and 41-year-old James Lull has just arrived on the Hawaiian island of Kauai to begin a new chapter in his life. Lull lands a few jobs in the mortgage industry and eventually ends up as the branch manager at U.S. Financial 1000, and he pitches her an investment opportunity. He says many of his loan applicants have poor credit scores, too low to qualify for mortgages. Investors like Mortimer can lend his clients short-term bridge loans. The applicants can then pay off debts.
If he saw somebody whose credit score wasn't quite high enough and it was something as easy as paying off your credit card, those were the people who he would present to me. He would say, this is the situation. Would you be interested in loaning X amount of